the president did mention that Israel ought to abide by international law. Does that, in your view, mean that Israel must end its cutoff of water, electricity, food, and medicine to the people in Gaza?
I will say that, as the president made clear, Israel has suffered from a brutal terrorist attack. Israel has the right to defend itself. It has the right to take action against the terrorists who launched this brutal attack and killed Israeli civilians. It killed American civilians, killed mothers and children and babies and kidnapped children.
And what's Israel doing?
And so they are going to take action to respond to this terrorist attack and take action to secure their country, and we support them. As the president made clear, we always encourage all of our allies and partners to act in strict accordance with international law. That is what democracies do, and I would just point out that, of course, is not what Hamas did. Saeed, let me just finish. That is not, Saeed, that is not what Hamas did in coming into Israel and kidnapping and murdering innocent civilians.
Okay, I understand. I mean, Hamas, you have Hamas listed as a terrorist organization. They don't get $4 billion a year from you. They don't have military aid and support and so on. So that is established. You're saying that Israel is a democracy. It's a country that abides by international law. I'm asking you, the cutoff of water, electricity, food, and medicine is considered a war crime. Do you call on Israel to cease its effort now in cutting off medicine,
Let
water,
me start by saying that we are
aid?
in the early days of Israel's response. Israel has a right to conduct an aggressive response, to respond to the terrorism that's been committed against its citizens. We expect them to follow international law. We believe that they will, and we will remain in close contact with them about it.
You believe they should not intentionally target civilians? That's one. Second, do you have any idea on the number of Palestinians killed by Israel in the last 4 days?
I have seen public reports.
What are these?
I am not going to speak to Saeed, I'm going to speak to what the U.S. government can verify, which I've done with a number of U.S. citizens. I will let Israel speak to the number of Israeli citizens that have killed, as well as the number of Palestinians that have killed.
The 14 that the president spoke about are Palestinian Americans?
I don't have any degree whether they are Palestinian Americans, whether they're dual citizens. It ultimately doesn't matter to us. American citizens are American citizens.
My last question to you, Matt. I mean, the president said that Hamas is motivated, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, motivated solely by the quest to kill Jews. Do you believe that is to be the case? Is it the assessment of this government that Hamas' sole motivation is to go out and kill Jews? There's no context. There's no siege that has gone on for 16 years. There's no raid after raid by the Israelis.
Saeed, I am just going to say that is a bit of a surprising question after what we saw Hamas carry out this weekend. When we saw Hamas go in and deliberately target Israeli citizens and not just soldiers in the IDF, but women, children, kidnap them. We all saw the images that across our television screens of Hamas behaving in the most inhumane way possible. So I won't speak to their motivations, but I think they're pretty clear. Let me move on. Go ahead.
Is there another context?
Thank you very much, Matt. I have a question about the U.S. role, potential U.S. role.
We clearly would be concerned about any country that is providing support to Hamas, whether it be financial, whether it be military, and would look to counter that action. And we do it first and foremost by making sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself against the recent terrorist attacks.
Does Israel have a right to kill civilians? Does Israel have a right to kill civilians,
I'm going to
Matt?
call on the way we do it in this briefing room, and you and I have
is
this
that you pick whoever you want to pick whenever you want to pick.
Is I call on people and they ask questions, and
I'm a potted plant.
Go ahead.
Yesterday, Secretary Blinken deleted a tweet.
We have made very clear that we do not have any grievance with the Palestinian people. As I have said from this podium a number of times, we support steps that improve the livelihoods, improve the dignity of the Palestinian people.
They're being bombed, and you're totally silent, and you're giving Israel a green light. This is absurd, Matt. This is completely absurd.
Excuse me. And we supply humanitarian aid that goes directly to the Palestinian people to benefit them. And I think the point that we would make, this is something the Secretary got into over the weekend, there are two paths forward for the region. There is a path of stability and conflict and normalization of relations with Israel. And then there is a path of death and destruction. And it is Hamas that favors that path of death and destruction. We do not have any quarrel with the Palestinian people, which is why we think it's important to continue to provide humanitarian aid that directly benefits them. not the terrorists the terrorists who ultimately are going to be responsible for the loss of many Palestinian lives.
But Israel is raining down death and destruction, and you're completely silent, Matt. It's beyond parody what you're doing. What you're doing is beyond parody, Matt. How can you live with
questions and
yourself?
answers. Go ahead. Israel has every right to respond forcefully to these attacks. It is what any country would do if they saw children being dragged away as hostages, if they saw children being slaughtered, if they saw people that were a music festival being gunned down in mass. Any country would respond forcefully. We support Israel's right to do it. We think it's appropriate to do it. They have to be able to defend and secure their country.
Any country would lay a siege?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in March, you condemned Israel's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, for calling for wiping the Palestinian village of Huwara off the map. This week, we've heard the defense minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, declare that he's fighting human animals in Gaza as Israel cuts off the gas, the water, and the electricity. We've heard Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, declare that all hiding places will be turned to rubble in a besieged coastal enclave where there are 1 million children. We've heard Ariel Kalner, who is a member of Knesset from the ruling Likud party, call for a Nakba 2.0, which is essentially a call for genocide and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians as 850 are dead in Gaza. So what do you think of that rhetoric in light of your previous condemnation?
Let me say a few things about that. Number one, we expect, as we said, that Israel will conduct its operations in accordance with international law. Number two, there are going to be a number of statements made over the course of this conflict, and when we have disagreements with them, we will make those known privately. Number three, though,
but you made them
let me just speak to this. Number three, some of the questions I'm getting today do seem to ignore the fact that Israel just had hundreds of its citizens killed, people who were taken hostage, and pretend that Israel shouldn't be able to conduct any kind of...
Okay, well, if you can't condemn genocidal rhetoric, do you acknowledge that 80 Palestinian children have been killed? Do you acknowledge that? Will you even acknowledge that?
Let me finish.
80 Palestinian children killed this week?
Again.
Babies? Do you acknowledge that?
You asked a question. I will answer the question.
Okay, well, that's my question.
So I'm going to start by answering the previous question that was interrupted.
Okay.
I will say some of the questions seem to pretend that Israel should not be able to conduct operations to defend itself and hold accountable the terrorists who killed civilians. That is not Israel's policy. That is not our policy. It is something that we would vehemently disagree with. Israel has the right to secure its country the way any country does. It has the right to defend itself against terrorism. It has the right to hold terrorists accountable. And I will say, ultimately, the Hamas terrorists who launched these operations, there is no one who has more disregard for Palestinian civilian life than those terrorists. Because those terrorists, let me finish.
Not the people who killed
those terrorists
850 Palestinians, mostly civilians, bombing residential towers, bombing offices.
We seem to have a lot of new people. Those terrorists launched this activity knowing that there would be retaliation, knowing that Israel would have to defend itself as any country did, knowing that it would lead to the unfortunate loss of civilian lives.
They're not seeking the release of Palestinian captives in Israeli prisons?
Let me go ahead.
That's amazing.
So baby killing is okay here.
Why can't you acknowledge the death
of
Palestinians? So
baby killing is okay here.
You can't even acknowledge it.
We always mourn the loss of civilian life. It is an unfortunate circumstance every time it happens. And as I just said, the Hamas terrorists who launched this terrorist attack, knowing that it would produce the loss of not just direct Israeli lives, who they took in their incursions across the border, but also the loss of Palestinian civilian life, they ultimately bear the responsibility for those acts.
It took 36 minutes to do that. Will you call on Israel to not kill civilians?
I'm going to ask.
Will you call on Israel to not kill civilians?
I just did do that.
It's a simple question. Will you call on Israel to not kill